knowledge exists to be impaired. In particular, your knowledge of what I'm doing, I'm going to do my very best to impair. That's a straight-out answer. And several years later, about 4 years ago, I encountered an art dealer. By the way, being an art dealer and a gentleman, it's mutually exclusive. His name was Notoy Mendax. What an unusual name. He had been selling art in the Phoenix area, some very high-end, very expensive pieces of art. Magdalene, Dali, some beautiful pieces. But I've done a lot of art fraud investigations, mostly because it pleases me. And they wanted me to meet the art dealer, Notoy Mendax. Well, by gosh, I started thinking, Mendax, Mendax, Mendax. Anyone remember their Latin? Anyone old enough to have taken Latin? Root word, mendacious. Yeah, liar, lying. Notoy Mendax. Notoy. Start giggling. It's bastard. So essentially, his warning to all of his clients is that he's a lying bastard. So I sat down with lunch with him. I said, Notoy Mendax, lying bastard. He goes, you are very good, Mr. Files. We will finish lunch. Finished lunch, I bought the lunch, it was simple. We never saw him again. So, really, the first person you should stop trusting is yourself. You should have an unremitting suspicion of yourself. And think, trust me, I know what I'm doing. Now, I'm going to speak to the ladies for just a minute. How many times have you had to take a boyfriend to the hospital or the emergency room, or just go through one of his red-faced moments when he says, hey guys, watch this? That's usually, that's the phrase that most guys say right before there's a trip to the emergency room. This is something that we have to make sure that we don't do. I know what I know, okay? I know what I don't know. Of course, the follow-up is, I don't know what I don't know. That means I don't know the questions to ask to get me the information I don't know that I need. But then less logically, I don't know what I know. And that goes back to our little honest crook, knowledge exists to be impaired. We can be our own worst enemy when we're overconfident. As soon as you're overconfident, that's when the little antenna should go, pay attention. And I've always said this before, and be humble, be very humble, and remember to fight the good fight. And that fight is on behalf of our families and of our clients, to really find out what is the truth behind the matter. An attorney brought a client to me. They had purchased a glass business, a glazing business, that people are putting the bee stingies. And they had a small business. But when they bought it, the business dropped off almost exactly about 17%. It was one of these, it's going well, it's doing well, they bought it, down here. And we're looking through the books, we're trying to figure if there's any mischief in the books. No, the books tied up very well. It was very well done. And we go through it again and again and again and again, and finally I have to go see the gentleman who sold them the business. I said, sir, I really do not understand what happened. He goes, oh, I shouldn't have sold them the business. They didn't understand the ancillary marketing plan. I said, what? The ancillary marketing plan? He said, yes. What you do is you pick a neighborhood, and you hire a couple of those little Vietnamese kids, and they all go around and they put flyers out everywhere. They're very good, you know. Then you take a wrist rocket at night and you go through the neighborhood and break the windows. And oh my gosh. So I go back to the people who bought the glazing business. Did he tell you about the ancillary marketing plan? Yes. I look over at the attorney and he goes, So, the measure of success for me as an instructor, for you to lead today, actually tomorrow, is thinking about due diligence and risk. I really want you to think differently about it. And I want to emphasize something called the difference between decide and choose. And decide. What is insecticide? What does insecticide do? Kills insects. What's homicide? Come on. You watch the crime shows on television. A homicide detective looks into
Killing humans.
right, killing humans. So decide really translates quite frankly to the death of choice. And the problem when you decide is often you anchor yourself into that decision, get it nice and tight. And if new information comes up, you don't move. Because you don't want to be seen as wrong. You don't want to be wrong, you don't want to be seen as wrong. It's a real problem. And you've all seen those people. And you just want to hit them with the 2x4. As long as the cameras are on. With choice, learn to choose. And you know what? Make the best choice you can. If you choose wrong, so what? Choose again. Own and eat the mistake. Move on. How do we learn? Mistakes. If you never make a mistake in your life, you're going to be one of the most ignorant people on the planet. Truly. This is how we learn through struggle. And part of the struggle is failure. Beauty of mistakes. This is not about risk avoidance. Due diligence is not about avoiding risks. Due diligence is about spotting the risks and then asking the questions to understand them. The board of directors who is risk adverse always looks to cut costs. Always looks to cut costs. But there could be risk in it. You're right. There's a risk of me crossing the street. In some places, it's a lot higher than others. Have any of you ever been in Sicily? Ooh. That's scary. What is our standard of care? Customer due diligence. Banks have to do customer due diligence. They need to know who their customers are. Enhanced due diligence. I like that. You say due diligence, but in a different voice. That's where you actually have to verify that all this really is true with extra information. Financial due diligence. Due diligence on financials. I like that. I wrote a book about that. Cultural due diligence. You know, that really is something that we need to think more and more about. We all come from different backgrounds. You go to the Chinese and the Japanese, and boy, I'll tell you, a meeting starts right on time. They respect time. Now, they may not respect you or your money, but they respect the time. Or over in the Middle East, they argue about everything. As soon as you come to a deal, as soon as you leave the room, it's going to change. So you just have to be prepared to change it before them. It's very unsettling for them, for someone who isn't from the Middle East to do that. It's a great deal of fun. And deep due diligence. Never ever use that. That implies that everything else you did was shallow. Why perform due diligence? This is my favorite picture I have ever taken. It says right there, no diving. Monkeys can't read. This is why we do due diligence. I could read a technical manual all day long about how to fix engineering systems for HVAC on a building. Have you read the material, Mr. Files? Yes, I have. What's the follow-up question? Do you understand the material? No. What are we doing due diligence? Initiating new relationships. Even with customers. We sometimes do our own little informal due diligence, especially if we're granting them credit. Mergers and acquisitions of a business. Ongoing compliance and risk identification. Due diligence also is a verb, not a noun. You must understand that due diligence isn't a noun, it is a verb. It is a process, and it's a way of thinking. Levels of due diligence. Cursory information, review, substantive information, deep dive. Really, after you've had the attorneys and the accountants look at the financials, you need to know more about the customers of a business. And I'll give you an example called Aviva Insurance. Huge company, British company, great company. They bought a series of companies here in the United States. It showed the amount of insurance product they were selling, the number of people they brought on board. It was some very good numbers. And Aviva bought a series of different companies in the United States that had a very aggressive sales force. Why was their sales force so much more aggressive and successful than others? That's the question I would have asked. But did they hire me? No. What happened is that these different firms were using the very same model of questionable sales tactics. They were selling annuities to 70-year-old people. They're selling 20-year annuities to 70-year-old people. You don't do that. That's elder abuse and fraud. This is how these people were getting these large numbers, is they were pushing up product to people that shouldn't have the product. So after Aviva had owned it for a period of time, that fuse, and they always go off, that fuse detonated when it was under Aviva's umbrella. And I feel sorry for Aviva, because they really are a good company, but they didn't look to how they got that business. Like the window company, he had good business, but he actually told the people how he got the business, but they wouldn't do it. There's tons of databases. There's something called TLO, LexisNexis, Pacer, which is for the federal courts, Dow Jones, Hoover's. There is more information out there than you could ever possibly want. I also think in any company you look at, you need expertise, subject matter expertise. What do I know about HVAC? Nothing. But I can find someone who does. What do I know about cultural information in the Middle East? I know just enough to know that I shouldn't be left alone. In-house research is very good, and in-house research can often take you very far. But depending upon the level of where you're going, maybe you need to bring someone in from outside, if for nothing else to act as a coach. Act as a coach to let you know there's some other things you can look at. The tipping point comes when you start asking questions. We've all had that feeling. We look at a bunch of papers and go, I don't know. There's something, that it's like the taste of a meal. You know when it's not right, but you may not know what's missing. For me, it's usually hot sauce, but you don't know what's missing. Huge case. Ritz-Carlton, the Cayman Islands. Ritz-Carlton, the Cayman Islands was assembled by a known fraudster. It was pointed out in several publications, in particular Offshore Alert, his entire fraud-feasing history. All of the history of the litigation behind the Cayman Island, Ritz-Carlton was put up there. And then the Schwann Foundation invested $36 million. Schwann Foundation was set up by Martin Schwann for Lutheran Charities. And it's a huge foundation, truly close to $1 billion. But even after all of this, they invested $36 million into the Ritz-Carlton program. It's now in receivership. They should get back around $3. They, quote unquote, did all of their due diligence internal and did not hire outside expertise. Oops. What's really even scarier is you could have Googled Ritz-Carlton and you would have found the stories. In anything we look at, we need to come up with a hypothesis. Why is it this way? For example, with the Aviva, why have they done so well? Well, let's go test it. That's part of the questioning process. We come up with a hypothesis and we test it. And the hypothesis should be provisional ideas whose merit requires evaluation. We really have to think about it. And we need to make the hypotheses specific, and we have to keep pulling these out there until we get answers. We need documentation explaining the case. For why is the earth flat? We own this building. I graduated from Annapolis. I love that story. Another one, this bottle of wine is 200 years old and worth $15,000. Well, first of all, why can't you buy a new bottle for $8,000? What's happening right now in the wine business is wine has been going through the roof for so long. After they serve wine in one of these fancy restaurants, that bottle, that empty bottle, often has a street value of many hundreds of dollars to a wine counterfeit. And what he will do is he will take that bottle, clean it up, put whatever he wants in it, a new cork and an appropriate cap, and how are you to know the difference? I love a good criminal scheme. It brightens my day. A fellow by the name of Ebe Skov, head of North and South America for Tabasco and Search, a competitor to Bechtel. He built things like dams, power plants. He introduced me the concept of fatal flaws. You have a project before you, and it has 100 problems. You think to yourself, by gosh, I can solve 99 of them. Okay, set those 99 to the side. Focus on the one you don't know how to solve, a fatal flaw. Because don't waste your time and effort on the other 99 if you can't solve that one. This is one of the most valuable tools I've had in choice making. Do you know what an inchoate claim or liability is? An inchoate claim is a claim that hasn't really got its full force. For example, if I die, my wife gets $750,000. So she has a claim against me, but it's inchoate. That something has to happen before she gets that money. I die. There are all sorts of different types of inchoate claims. And it might be an example of, we have a claim against a bank, and we have a claim against that bank because the bank was run, and but for their failure to follow their anti-money laundering policy, that this fraud would have not come through this bank. So we have an inchoate claim against this bank for fraud, but we have to prove all of this trail to get that claim. That's another example of an inchoate claim. What types of inchoate claims and liabilities does that business have against others, and others may have against it? And what might the transaction trigger? We may be, there may be the old golden parachute. We think of things internally. I can tell you one man who worked a marketing campaign for El Pollo Asado in Arizona, and it was great. Had people standing there behind the counter in red and white stripe stuff. You want your bucket of chicken greasy or extra greasy? It was a great ad until it triggered KFC dumping $20 million into the local advertising market and squishing El Pollo Asado. What might a transaction trigger? And it could be non-compete agreements, it could be releases from compete agreements. You may have a lease agreement that says this lease is good, but it's not transferable. So when he buys your business, lease agreement isn't transferable. Oh, crud. Oops, we're out in the parking lot. And I said crud, I'm so proud of myself. In information, when we're looking through databases, this is what we're getting. We're getting tertiary information, third-hand information. It's compiled, and it's often wrong. My wife's name is Laura B. Files. I go by L. Burke Files. Uh-oh. If you pull my credit report even to this day, there's nothing on it. Nothing. You pull her credit report, not only does she have very good credit, but it says, fraud alert, going by 2 socials and 2 names. Secondary information is information that may be compiled by a professional. Primary information is those solid records. And if you're looking at court records, you really have to get the actual court records to look at. That's the primary information. Do we work on rumor? Yeah. I saw that and go, yeah. And we work on rumor because there may be a nugget of wisdom in that rumor. And it would be an act of folly not to test the rumor. And when you're getting information, remember the purpose of the information. I had a wonderful investigator, and he would go into a background of a person, and we needed this information. He was all the way down here, he had more, he had his baseball scores and what he did as a kid. It's like, no. We have a purpose. The purpose is within this field. Stop. This is wasted time, I can't bill. Stop. The employment he had with me has stopped. Okay. Many plans only work if everything goes right. How many times have you heard that chain of ifs? And if I get the loan, if I get the technology, and if it gets done, change. Very little is truly certain. Much communication is ambiguous. Can we plan to succeed when everything goes wrong? One of the things that the anti-money laundering laws, Bank Secrecy Act laws and Patriot Act laws requires that every bank have an AML program that is robust. What is robust? Whatever the regulator thinks that day. And that's a problem. We have to be aware of things such as adverbs and adjectives. I'm the greatest firm in the world. Goody, according to who? Probably me. You've got to take a look at those adjectives and adverbs in any descriptor and begin pulling them out and see what it looks like after they're out. And why? Characteristics of uncertainty. You don't want to create uncertainty when you're making representations, and you certainly want to dig below uncertainty when you're receiving those representations. Is he telling me the truth? I mean, there's a whole school that you can go to learn things like body language and the rest to get indications of creative storytelling. Is my car going to break down? How many times have you thought, I'm going to take a road trip? Is my car going to make it? That's a characteristic of uncertainty, is questioning. Is 247,719 divisible by 7? Anyone? Yeah, I don't know. It could be, it may not be. Then he's going to get the calculator. Excellent. And that's exactly what you do. Is ask a question, and he's going to do the work to get the answer. And now the story is a long story. You know, it's still story though, even a blind squirrel can find a couple of nuts every once in a while. And that's okay, that's luck. And the story of the pirate and the eye patch, it's a bad joke. It's about a man who just doesn't have any luck. And asked him to sit down. Captain Hook, here at the Interviewer, I'd like to know, how did you get the hook on your hand? Was it fighting pirates or alligators? No, it got caught in an elevator door at the aloft. Oh, that's terrible. How did you wear the eye patch? What happened to your eye? He goes, I had only had my hook a week or two, and there's a fly flying around my head, and I tried to get rid of it. There are people like that are that unlucky. And the answer is, you don't talk to me, do you? Is that divisible by 7?
No.
And in the process of thinking about it, we need to define the problem. Oops. Duplicate slide. As we go through, to define the problem, our categories and list, our list of questions must be exhausted. And the list of answers to each question that we can anticipate must be exhausted. And each hypothesis for each outcome should be drafted, and the sources of information identified. So you have a question of me, Mr. Files. If you come to work with me, do you have any agreements that would prohibit you from working for my organization, such as non-compete agreements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or commitments that may come up during our initial work? Well, I'm going to have to say yes or no, and you're going to have to say very good. If you say yes, could you share them with me? If you say no, would you sign a statement to the fact that none of this exists? You're trying to make that, you've asked a question, you've got a hypothesis that I may have conflicts, you've identified the issue, you've now confronted me with the issue, and you've asked a very good question. All right.